would like to thank everybody who came out today for coming out today. Boring orders of business first. I guess there's a sign-in book here by the podium, so we remember who you are. If you're hungry, my dad's favorite meal would have been pizza and ice cream. So we have a lot of pizza and we have a lot of ice cream. And I think there may be maybe a couple of other things back there. I have not made it back to that table to check. The microphone is not necessarily for the room because people can pretty much be heard here. The microphone is for those cameras because this service is being recorded for friends and family who weren't able to make it. So if anybody wants to speak, I will hand you the microphone. If anybody doesn't want to be videotaped, we're going to keep the cameras pointed this way. So if you guys are sitting at the tables, you are safe. Slideshow. I don't know if I should begin at the beginning or begin at the end and loop back to the beginning. I really am not sure how to do that. So I never took the time to write notes down. Those who know me know I speak extemporaneously off the top of my head, make stuff up as I go along, and wing it. Yeah, again, I want to thank everybody for coming out. Obviously, there are a lot of you that I know. And there are a lot of you that I don't know, that I've never met before. So I really do appreciate, I'm a little low, I'll sit up on the stage. I really do appreciate everybody coming out to talk about my dad. And I guess I'll start at the beginning. I'll do the boring stuff first. Dad was born November 22nd, 1939 in Brooklyn, New York. His father had some congenital heart things, so my father's father, Max Samsky, who changed the name to Miller at some point between 1931 and 1933, we don't really know when, he passed away before my father was born. So my father was raised by his mother, Faye, and his three aunts, Gert, Marty, and Betty. And my mom used to joke that Dad was raised by 4 Jewish mothers, and that was a horrifying fate. And when the slideshow cycles around back to the beginning, you'll see that, because that'll be all the black and white photos. My dad graduated from, my dad was Maxwell Michael Miller. I'm Michael Matthew Miller. And that's a long-running joke because my dad did not like being called Maxwell because growing up he got the Maxwell house jokes. And he got the Miller beer jokes. And he got the M&M jokes. And I only have to put up with 2 of the 3 of those. So my dad went by Mike. And this would occasionally cause problems. One of the credit card companies thinks I am my dad, and one of my credit reports states that I was born in 1939. And going through stuff and preparing for this memorial, I found out that Dad has put Michael Maxwell Miller on several of his official documents, including his high school diploma. So my dad's high school diploma from 1957 actually says Michael Maxwell Miller, so he really didn't like Maxwell. After he graduated from high school, he joined the Army, where he proudly served in the reserves from 1957 to 1965 as a PFC mechanic. He fixed Jeeps. And he entered as a PFC and he left as a PFC, but I guess that ties in the Legion, right? Because he served. And then he went to the University of Gainesville in Florida. He was a Gator, and that's where he met my mom. And they got married in 64, I think. It was either 63 or 64. They passed 50 years together when Mom passed away, and that was 2015. And my dad then went to work for a series of banks. He went to work for Southeast Banking Corporation, where he worked on the very first ATM systems. So when you're taking money out of a bank, you can thank my dad. ATMs are slow, by the way, because they're still using 300 baud modems in 2000, at least as far as 2013. So, I don't know, useless trivia. And he worked for City National Bank, and he worked for REI, which was a financial institution, not the sporting goods store. And he was a COBOL, Snowball, and Fortran programmer, and the last few years of his career, he had to travel a lot. He was mostly out of state. And that was because the changeover was happening from COBOL mainframes to PC-based systems. So my dad ended his career by overseeing his own obsolescence. And obviously he married my mom and they had me at some point. Might have been a bad call. But, well, I guess we'll talk about some of these photos a bit. So here we're kind of in the 1970s. I'm pretty sure I took that. And that's Dad and Mom, and I think that might be the Garden of the Gods in Colorado. That's Yosemite. So Mom and Dad like to travel. But Mom had a condition called Charcot-Marie-Tooth. It's a neuropathy. It's similar to multiple sclerosis. It leads to death of the nerves in the extremities. It leads to loss of muscle control and leads to muscle atrophy. So Mom started to be, ooh, that didn't come out on the projector. Mom started to need a wheelchair in the 80s, and by the late 90s, she was mostly dependent on the wheelchair, and after 2006, she was completely in the wheelchair. And where that comes in on a lot of these photos is, I mean, besides the work, besides the being a parent, besides whatever, what Dad liked to do and what Dad wanted to do was travel. He liked to go places and he liked to do things. You will see so many photos in here of Dad canoeing or playing golf or riding horses or rock climbing or kayaking or coming out of helicopters, because he liked to go places and he liked to travel. And when he retired, his dream was to get a Winnebago, sell the house, drive around the country, but Mom wasn't able to travel. So, to be blunt, Mom passed away in 2015. Mom herself would have said that she hoped she passed away before Dad, because Mom did require full-time care, and partially that was so I and Laura would not have to continue taking care of her. And it was partially because she wanted Dad to be able to take a few years to travel, and he did do that. There are about 160 pictures in this slideshow. 58 of them were from the last 4 years. So we did some trips to Antarctica and South America and Australia and New Zealand. He was going to do those trips, and then he was nice enough to ask Laura and I if we wanted to go with him, and we said yes, because if somebody offers to take you to Antarctica and foot the bill, that is the proper response. So this slideshow will heavily represent those last 3 years of his life. And you'll see those when suddenly his hair turns gray in the photos, when we go from gray beard, black hair Mike to all gray. So that's where we've caught up to that. And my dad, I mean, everybody here knows this. My dad was a really nice guy. Right? And he would have described himself as a lone wolf. He would have said he didn't need a lot of friends. He didn't need a lot of people. And I think he would be surprised, and I hope he would be touched at how many people have come out today to remember him. Because if you told him the regard you had for him, he'd probably roll his eyes at you disgustedly. Because that was Dad. But he was he had a very dry wit. He had a very sarcastic humor, but he was pleasant to everybody, always said hi, always cracking jokes. And he was this very strange blend of the most altruistic person you can imagine and completely clueless. And an example of clueless would be, well, Laura has an onion allergy. It's a bad onion allergy. And Dad would make onion rolls in the toaster, and we could get him to remember to use only the left side of the toaster for onion rolls so that we could keep one half clean. But the toaster would be in front of the drawer with the silverware, and he'd leave the drawer open while he was buttering his onion roll, and he'd drop onions all in the drawer, and it wouldn't even occur to him that he would do that. So there was a certain amount of cluelessness in there. But he's also a man where we had a $50,000 van that he did a $50,000 wheelchair conversion on that he sold to a family in Need to Lake Elsinore for $100, and the only reason he sold it for $100 is if he gave it to them as a gift, they'd have to pay taxes on it. He also gives to a lot of charities. I'm just finding out how many now that we are taking over his paperwork. There are at least 2 dozen. So there are a few people who've asked about flowers or other things. And if you were thinking about that, I'll still have to put the list together, but if anyone was going to do anything for my dad, I would say to just give a charitable donation to one of the charities he gave to. If you want some cognitive dissonance, they did give to Judicial Watch and Planned Parenthood, which is weird. Hi, Patrick. How you doing? So, I could probably ramble about Dad for another hour or so, but I'm not going to do that to you. We're going to go to the sad bit. On May 4th, 2019, my dad went to go hiking in Griffith Park with his friend Bill. Hi, Bill. And Dad took my car, which is a stick shift, because Laura doesn't drive stick, and Laura and I were supposed to work the wedding of John and Carrie. Hi, John and Carrie, that day. And we were getting ready to leave the house. Well, no, I'm jumping ahead. So what Dad did was he parked in the lower lot by the merry-go-round in Griffith Park to use the restroom. And that lot's on an incline, and he got out of the car and he forgot to set the parking brake. That's that clueless part of Dad I was talking about earlier. That was stupid. He forgot to set the parking brake. And then as he described it, he got about 25 yards away, and he realized the car was rolling. And normally, Bill, you guys and Chuck, you guys would go, right, Tuesday, Thursday, around 8 p.m., and the park would be empty, right? So Dad's first thought was, I'll just let that roll onto the grass and stop. No, this was Saturday at 9:30 in the morning, and he saw that car was rolling into where a children's birthday party was setting up. And Dad was not going to let anybody else get injured because he did something stupid. So he ran to try and stop that car and catch it and make sure nobody else got hurt. 2,400-pound car, 79-year-old man, car wins. Dad got hit. Dad described it as he blacked out at the time of the impact, and he woke up with the car on top of him. Dad says that the car stopped with the rear wheel on his ribcage, and people were pushing it off of him. So his initial injuries included a fractured left hip, a fractured left clavicle, his left lung deflated, and his rib cage largely shattered. He was really messed up. So we get a call, Laura and I, we are literally walking out the door, and the officer, of course, they're going to lead into this sort of thing gently. So the officer says, your father's been involved in a wee bit of an accident, which is a little bit of an understatement. And the paramedics are working on him now, and I think his left lung deflated. Wow! Wee bit of an accident. It's a bit of an understatement. So we called Carrie, and Carrie, I thanked you at the time, and I will thank you again right here for this. To Carrie's credit, there are a lot of women who would be really, really annoyed if their wedding photographer called them 2 hours before they were due to arrive and said, I'm not coming. And Carrie, I said, Carrie, I don't think we're going to make it. My dad's in the hospital. And that's as far as I got before she said, go see your dad. So thank you. So we went to see Dad, and they transferred him into Ward 5B at USC Medical Center. And we walked in, and here's Dad. He rolls his eyes in disgust, and he says to Laura and I, oh God, why are you here? Why aren't you at your wedding? Turns to his nurse and says, see, I told you not to call them. And then May was really rough, right? He had the initial list of injuries, and they had to put drains in him, and they had to do tests, and he was able to breathe the first day, but the second day is when he wasn't able to breathe, so they had to put him on an esophageal ventilator. And that was driving Dad crazy. He really just wanted a drink of water. And you can't have that when you have a tube down your throat. And he caught double pneumonia and influenza at the same time. Yeah, that was rough. And that was after they did the 2 surgeries. They were going to do 1, but they had to split it up into 2 parts. They actually opened Dad up, and they reinforced his rib cage with steel plates, 4 through 9 on the left and 5 through 9 on the right. And his kidneys failed for a couple weeks, so he was on dialysis. Hi, Glenn. And we were having trouble getting him to... There was a week that was rough. There was a week where the esophageal ventilator was really driving him crazy, and he wanted it removed. They had to put him in restraints because he kept trying to pull it out. And we were having the conversation of, look, Dad, if they pull that out, you will die. You cannot breathe on your own. I want them to pull it out. No, you will die. Take restraints off, I'll pull it out. No, I will not do that. You pull it out. Hell no, I will not do that. But that was rough because I'm his son and I was also his power of attorney, and my duty in that situation is to accede to his wishes. That was one of the very few times when I said, hell no. And I think a lot of that was just, down and in pain. And then a week later, I finally asked him, because he still was hating, he wanted to be extubated. And I had to ask him, do you want to live? Do you want to fight for this? Because if he said no, I do not want to live, I'm done, then I would have had them extubate him right there. But he said no. Well, he wrote no. He gave me the thumbs up. I want to live. I want to fight for this. Okay. Well, then you need to be trached. He didn't want to be trached. And everybody at the hospital kept using the term trach. Now, some of you will know the correct term, and some of you will not. And my dad and I were both thinking tracheotomy. And a tracheotomy is an incision in the throat. It goes in through the voice box. They run a tube down in there. You may remember the commercial of the woman in the 80s. I have a voice box and I smoke through the hole in my throat. That's what Dad thought he was in for. That's what I thought he was in for. And that's why he wasn't giving consent. And then I'm talking to one of his doctors, and the doctor finally says tracheostomy. Just 1 syllable difference. And it's a huge difference. It's still a surgical incision, but it's down here by the clavicle. And it just immediately goes into the trachea, and they can close that up, and you can talk again. Tim, who is floating around here somewhere, he has had a tracheostomy, so he was able to show me that. So I was able to go up and talk with Dad and his doctor about that, and we gave Dad his consent. And I'll digress and say that that was the only visit I made to Dad that week because Laura and I both got sick. We were both running an elevated temperature, like 99.5, 99.6. So I don't want to walk into an ICU ward if I think I'm sick. That makes me a danger to my dad. That makes me a danger to the staff. That makes me a danger to other patients. That was the only day that week I went up because I had to have that conversation with Dad about the difference between a tracheotomy and a tracheostomy and get that damn consent. So they did the tracheostomy, and he did well. And on June 3rd, they transferred him out of USC to Kindred in La Mirada. Now, USC is classified as emergency trauma, so that's keep this man from dying. And Kindred La Mirada is classified as long-term acute, and that means let's help this man recover. And I'll be honest, Dad was not happy at Kindred at first. That first week, he thought initial response times were slow. So I talked to the nursing supervisor, and I had the nurses putting a log sheet up and having them log every time they checked in on him and everything they did. So that made Dad think that the nurses were mad at him because they had a log sheet up. And they were mad at me. Why do you think they're mad at you, log sheet? No, I asked for that. That's guard dog Mike. But I mean, otherwise, I will admit there were 2 genuine problems at Kindred La Mirada. One was a 1-day thing that was taken care of very quickly, and that was, I'll digress into her. We had an agency nurse, not a staff nurse, who did not know what the term suction meant. My dad asked for suction, 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 suction. He has a trach, he wants suction. Suction? What part of suction do you not understand? Go get me someone who knows what they're doing. I will flat out say I spoke to the nursing supervisor that day, and that nurse's contract was terminated in front of me. But I bring that up because I want to stress that I do not think Kindred did anything wrong. And that was, that particular nurse was a real complaint, and it was immediately handled by the nursing supervisor. You're right, this is not acceptable, and it was immediately rectified. Another problem Dad had was his call button had an intermittent mechanical fault in it. Sometimes he would hit the button and it just wouldn't go off. We figured that out. Because I was in the room and Dad was in the room with his nurse and he's hitting the button. I'm going, she's here, why are you hitting? Wait a minute, that alarm's not going off, this thing isn't lighting up. So we immediately got that changed. And then after that, Dad didn't have any problems with Kindred because they were responsive and they were attentive and they were doing a good job, and there was just a problem with a button. And it was at Kindred where Dad started on his respiratory therapy and his physical therapy. And his respiratory therapy was, they had to put him on the T-bar. I mean, the key is you have to be able to breathe on your own. Plus, if you can breathe on your own for a while, they can put the PMV cap over the tracheostomy, and then Dad could have that drink of water he wanted. And he could have that pint of ice cream that I had sitting in the freezer to share with him. First day on the T-bar didn't go so well. Under 5 minutes. The next day he did 5 minutes. The next day he did 45 minutes. Then he did 2 hours. Then he did 6 hours and 45 minutes of completely unassisted breathing. And that was Thursday the 13th. And then we got to Friday the 14th. And Friday, he woke up and he was confused. He did not remember the accident. He did not know why he was in the hospital, and he did not know what year it was. And that was about 9 in the morning. By 11:30, he was back to full cognition. So the first assumption was that it had something to do with his medication, because you had Ativan and you had OxyContin and you had fentanyl and you had other things going on. And I mean, these are all powerful drugs, right? You've got sedatives and you've got anti-anxiety medication. And we'll be circling around to the Jewish, 4 Jewish mothers in a minute. But so they can cause short-term memory loss. So they changed his medication schedule and they changed his medication doses starting that day. And I had not gotten out of the house as fast as I wanted that day. And normally Dad, around 6 p.m., that's when they would give him, he would be due for his dose of OxyContin. And the Oxy would knock him out. So they would give him his Oxy at 6, and by 6:10 he would be writing on his clipboard, "Me sleep, you go away." And so it was 5:30, and I'm like, oh, I haven't gone down to, maybe I won't go down. They're just going to Oxy him. No, I'm going to go down. At least talk to the nurses, find out how everything went today, apologize for being late, tell him what we did, and stick around until he's ready to sleep, and then I'll go to work, because I was going to a karaoke gig that night, and it was the first night of work I had done since Dad's accident. So I go down, and his physical therapy that day had gone exceptionally well. He got out of bed, he stood unassisted. That's a 79-year-old man with osteopenia who had a fractured hip who got out of bed and stood unassisted in 6 weeks. It's fantastic. My dad was very strong. My dad always went to the gym. I think a couple of you are here from his Tai Chi class, so you know he was taking Tai Chi and he was taking stick classes for balance, and he went hiking with Mr. Bill and Mr. Chuck. And when we were at Kindred, even before the physical therapists had assessed him, Dad had me doing exercises with him because Mom was disabled. So Dad and I were already trained in the exercises you would do on somebody who's mostly immobilized and with atrophy. So he was already pushing himself to get physically better. So the physical therapy, he stood, and then the respiratory therapy didn't go as necessarily as well. He only did 45 minutes. And he was feeling down about that when I went down. I only did 45 minutes. Well, don't worry about it. You know, you 5, 20, 45, 2 hours, 7 hours, 45 minutes. And you stood today. You're tired. You just wore yourself out. You'll have this tomorrow. You'll have good days. You'll have bad days. Your trend is moving forward. And this conversation is occurring very slowly over about an hour. Dad's duty nurse and I were changing him and making him comfortable and cleaning him because we didn't need another nurse to do that. I can help out with that. So it's this slow conversation that's happening with Dad trying to write when he's turned on his side, and I'm trying to hold his leg, and she's got cleaning wipes. But he said, come tomorrow for respiratory therapy at 3:30, and his nurse was like, well, is respiratory therapy scheduled at 10:30 to 10:30? And I'm like, yeah, but Dad knows I'm going to work tonight, and I'm probably not going to get home until after 4 in the morning, so 10 is really early. He's asking you to reschedule that. So she goes to reschedule that for 3:30 so that I can come down. And I asked Dad, do you have me coming down here for moral support? And he goes, And many of you know I'm a trained vocalist. It's all about the diaphragmatic breathing. So do you want me to come down and remind you to sit up straight and hold your head in this position and no tension on the esophagus and breathe all the way down to your nutsack? And translate respiratory therapy into dad speak for you? And he said, yeah. Okay. And this was after 6 because the incident in the morning, they didn't actually oxy him at 6. They scheduled his oxy for 7 instead. So this is probably about 6:45. And so we've just had this conversation about coming in tomorrow in the respiratory therapy, and we've been in, Dad gave me the thumbs up, and, and then he asked pain meds, and I talked to his nurse who was still there. Hey, it's 6:50, I know he's due at 7, but you want to do that now? Dad was in a gown, glove, mask protocol because he was in the ICU and they were worried about infection. So a lot of my harassing the poor nurses on do that thing now is just about, why ungown and come back in 10 minutes and use more resources, right? You don't need to throw away a gown and gloves and mask. I mean, they're cheap and they use a lot of them, but the heck with it. So yeah. So, she gives Dad his oxy. And I check with Dad to make sure he's comfortable, and he says he's comfortable, and then he writes, me sleep now, you go away. And I say, okay, I'll see you tomorrow at 3 for your respiratory therapy, and we'll have a good day tomorrow, and I love you. And normally if I told Dad I loved him, he would roll his eyes in disgust. It was not something he'd been doing for that last month. He would just take it. So I'm driving up to Ontario, and it's about 8:45, and I get the call from Kindred that Dad has coded. So I do not go to Players. I actually make a whole bunch of phone calls to a whole bunch of different people. The first thing I remember when I said after Dad's accident, when we got there, the first thing he said was, why are you here? Why did you not go to your wedding? Right? So Dad would approve that I get the call that they're coding, and I call another KJ who will be at that bar anyway because pool league. Nikki, can you run? I call the bartender. I'm not coming in. I think my dad's dying. Grab Nikki. Then I call Tim. Then I called Chris. Chris, I'm not going to Players. And then I called Tim here because Tim's the June birthday party at the Legion was the 15th, and I was supposed to be KJ for that event. So I called Tim. I don't think I'm going to be running your event tomorrow, but I've already talked to Chris about it. And then I called Laura, who was sitting at home in sweats on her computer. You need to put on real clothes. We need to go. And then I get another call from the hospital, and they say we've been doing CPR for 25 minutes, and there's still no signs of life. And the attending physician that night was a man named Dr. Smart, and Dr. Smart already knew Dad and already knew Laura and knew me because he was one of the doctors at USC, and he was already somewhat familiar with Dad's case. But he worked at USC and he worked at Kindred, but it was his first night at Kindred. And the doctor changeover at Kindred was 8 to 9 p.m. So probably at about the point when Dad coded, right? Because you got to check in, you got to do your initial paperwork, and then you review your charts. So Dad probably coded right about the time that Dr. Smart was getting ready to grab his chart. And Dad's DNR had 10 minutes of CPR, specifically specified. And the morbid statistics on that is, at least according to the doctors at USC, if you have a patient who has undergone CPR for more than 10 minutes, your mortality rate is over 80%. If you go for over 20 minutes, you are looking at high probability of brain damage, and your mortality rate is now well over 90%. And Dad did not want to suffer from permanent mental damage. So even the 10 minutes of CPR was his concession for me. Dad's initial DNR was no CPR. The 10 minutes was for me. So they've been doing 25, and I start to say to Dr. Smart, his DNR only allows for, never mind, I'm overriding his DNR. You keep going until I get there. And that was so I could try and lie to myself and say that Dad did not die alone. He had family. I'm too smart for that. I don't believe my lie. So I get home, and poor Laura. I'm sure I came through that door bellowing at full voice, "Turn your computer off, get dressed now." What's happening? Dad is coding. He's probably dying. And visiting hours at Kindred were only till 9 p.m., and we're looking at close to 9:30 now, so they've got a nurse waiting for us in the lobby. And Laura drives, of course, because I should not have been driving at that point. And we pull into the parking lot, and I get out. And when I'm moving at speed, I can outrun Laura. So I go ahead, and she tells me to go ahead. So I run into the building, and as I pass the nurse in the lobby, "Do not close that door, my wife is coming behind me." I run into the ICU, I skid to a stop, I walk in to his room, and the whole trauma team is there. Big dude in black scrubs, big bearded man, pumping away on Dad. 45 minutes. And the whole trauma team looks at me. And I look at Dr. Smart and I say, "Anything?" And he says, "No." And of course, once again, I am his son and I am his power of attorney, so the ultimate call is mine. And I have no choice but to ask the trauma team to stop. They are done. And I actually managed to thank the trauma team for their work. And a nurse has taken a sheet. She's going to cover Dad. And I take the sheet from her and I cover Dad. And I take his hand. And that's when Laura is able to get in behind me because the trauma team is exiting. And that's pretty much when I lost it, so. The probable cause of death was a pulmonary embolism. That is when you get a blood clot in your lungs. It is always a risk factor with a patient who has been immobilized for a long time. My dad was already on blood thinners and anticoagulants, and he had clotting issues. Some of you may remember that when we were in Australia last year, he came up to me at one point and said, "Hey, don't tell anybody, but I think I have a blood clot in my leg. Are you crazy? I'm immediately narking you out to Laura and Nice, our tour guide." Surprisingly, the vascular specialist in Sydney actually cleared him to fly the next day, but yeah, he did. It's just, you know, he was prone to clotting. He also had cardiac issues. He had pre-existing conditions of arrhythmia and afibrillation, and arthroscopy, and a couple of other things going on. Arthroscopy is not the right word. And he already had stage 3 kidney disease, and the impact had already taken a lot out of him. I did not mention earlier in the story that he did survive a couple of cardiac incidents while he was at UCI. The first time they tried to extubate him, he went into full cardiac arrest. So, you know, he'd already been shocked a few times. He'd already had the kidneys failure and gone through the dialysis. But Laura thought with memory loss that morning that there was a possibility he'd had a stroke or an embolism or an aneurysm that hadn't been caught. And that is a possibility, but the most likely is pulmonary embolism. And oddly enough, the County of Los Angeles has ordered at least a partial autopsy just because of the circumstances of the incident, and it was in LA County. And they're billing us for it. Yeah, thanks. I will be fighting that. I will lose that fight, but no, man, you ordered that. You're not charging me for something you ordered. But I mean, it was really shocking because it was so sudden. The nurses at Kindred, we found out this last Wednesday, Laura and I, that Dad had been doing so well and had progressed so far in his therapy, standing and, you know, doing the 7 hours on T-bar. They were actually getting ready to move him out of ICU and onto the general floor. So the day shift nurses, when they walked in on Saturday and saw that his room was empty, asked their nursing supervisor which room he'd been moved to, because everybody thought he was going to make it. And that really would have beaten the odds, because honestly, if the accident had happened even only 5-10 years ago, he would not have survived that first weekend. And the fact that he survived that first month with that amount of trauma really is a testament to his strength. Okay. Some of you are actually dressed nicely. Bill, suit, jacket, tie. My dad was not a formal man. When we were in Antarctica on his birthday that year, one of the things that happened after seeing the Emperor Penguin was we were asked to, or we were invited to have dinner at the officer/captain's table, and Laura and I dressed up in whatever nice things we had. And, we got to see the scientists not wearing, jumpsuits and parkas, all dressed up in button-down shirts. And Dad rolls in with his T-shirt with the toothbrush that says, "I hate my job," and the roll of toilet paper saying, "Oh, please." Right? Dry sense of humor. So, why am I wearing a T-shirt to my dad's memorial? This style of T-shirt, not this one, because this one's in my size, I sent his back. This was going to be his Father's Day gift. Because ultimately my dad got himself killed because he was not going to let somebody else get hurt because of his mistake, because he was a freaking hero. And I was thinking Spider-Man because Spidey's my favorite. And right, with great power comes great responsibility is the best thing Stanley ever wrote. Those are words to live by. I try to live by them. I do not always succeed, because with great power comes great responsibility really just means if you can, you help. That's it. But it was Laura who said, well, they reinforced his ribs. He's literally the Man of Steel. And my dad was not into the superhero genre. He would not necessarily have gotten this shirt, and I would have said, "Shut up, you earned it, it's yours. You'll wear it and you'll like it." But that's the T-shirt, right? Man of Steel. And it goes without saying that I will miss the hell out of him. I'm very lucky to have had him as my father. And I know some of my friends would agree with me because they can attest that they were not as lucky with their fathers as I was with mine. I got a cool dad. He was a fun dad. He took me on awesome trips. Put up with my crap. Put up with Mom's crap, too. For the home viewing audience, Tom, if you're there, my Uncle Tom, my godfather, and I'm going to paraphrase this from memory, said of my dad that part of a testament to his innate goodness was just the fact that he did stay with Mom, because Mom was severely disabled and did require round-the-clock care for a very long time. And I loved my mom. Anybody here who's met me, you all know that I loved my mom. But my mom was also a really bitter, angry woman for the last couple of decades of her life, and she could be a huge pain in the butt to deal with. And Dad went through a long time where, say, he would try to go to his Tai Chi class and he would have to leave halfway through because Mom needed to go to the restroom and somebody had to come home and put her on the Hoyer lift. So as Tom wrote, putting up with Kathleen and her CMT just proves his goodness, because most men would have run screaming decades ago. And I asked Dad once why he stayed with Mom, and he just very simply said, "I made a vow." It's another thing about my dad. He was a man of his word. If he told you he would do a thing, he would do it. My dad did not lie. My dad did not dissemble. My dad didn't have time for that. I don't think my dad had interest in that. If you're going to lie and dissemble, you have to keep track of the BS you've told. And that's just, why bother? Why bother keeping track of that? It's just better to be honest and straightforward with people. So I am very lucky to have had my father. And my parents were both kind people. I can think of at least 2 people in this room, if not more, who took financial and or living assistance from my parents in times of need. And my parents never asked for anything back. They just, sure, you're a friend of Michael's. You need help? Sure. Right? Hey, here's both of them. So it hurts, but I like to think that overall, he probably didn't have very many regrets. He wanted to travel. He did. In those last few years, we went to San Francisco, and we went whitewater rafting in Monterey and the Winchester Mystery House, and we got to go to Chile, and we got to go to Argentina, and we got to go to the Falklands, and we got to go to Antarctica, and we got to go all over Australia and New Zealand. So Dad got to do what he wanted to do, which was travel the world and meet nice people who he didn't understand liked him, and eat all kinds of food that was different. By the way, kangaroos love to be petted, but try eating kangaroo before you go pet a kangaroo, or you will feel guilty about the kangaroo being delicious. Wallaby, not as much. And, I really don't think he would have really had much in terms of regrets. Dad joked for the last several years that, he was already past his sell-by date because he was older than he would have been, according to the actuarial tables. So my dad joked that he was past his sell-by date and he was on borrowed time anyway, and that he'd had a good run. And he did have a good run. And I wish he'd had a longer run. But, 79 isn't bad, and being happy and healthy and active and traveling and having adventures that late into your life, that's a good thing, I can only hope that I'm as healthy, anywhere near as healthy as my dad when I'm his age. I won't be because I'm a smoker. But that's my stupidity. Okay, so we're into 2016, so that is Monterey. So everything to the rest of the slideshow, that's Monterey Aquarium. So now we're into that last 3 years. So you'll see Monterey and Winchester Mystery House, and then Antarctica, or South America, and then Antarctica and Australia and New Zealand. And, Dad got to have a couple, there's Argentina, Chile. Dad had a good last couple of birthdays. His birthday in 2017 was, we got to have barbecue on sea ice. In Antarctica, our ship was an icebreaker. They just rammed into sea ice and set up a barbecue. And so we had barbecue and beer and bratwurst, and that photo will come up. It'll be like this fisheye lens photo of Dad just kind of standing in the middle of this expanse plane, and he'll be like in the center of the frame looking all squat because it's a fisheye, and that's his actual birthday picture. And we saw an emperor penguin. And seeing an emperor penguin in Antarctica, you'd think, you saw an emperor penguin in Antarctica, until you realize Antarctica is as big across as the continental United States. And seeing an emperor penguin where we were is going, wait, you're supposed to live in Maine. What are you doing in California? So, that's a good birthday. And then, I hate my job, oh please. And then his birthday last year, technically his birthday last year we drove for 14 hours because we were in New Zealand on a bus, but there's time zones. So we decided that we were going to celebrate his birthday on the 23rd in New Zealand because it would still be the 22nd in the United States. So Dad's birthday last year, he got to take a helicopter ride up to the top of Fox Glacier. And then we hiked the Franz Josef Glacier. And then they gave him, and then we drove to Pancake Rocks in Punakaiki. And everybody in the group, they got him a cake, and they gave him this awesome T-shirt. One of the rugby teams at New Zealand, and Dad said he would wear that shirt the very next day, and he did. And there will be the photo of him wearing that shirt. So that's his birthday photo. And I'm just saying, those are a couple of good birthdays to go out on, right? Some nice, memorable adventures. Oh yeah. Oh God, that was a beautiful day. Right there. Look at that ice. Dad, by the way, did not understand the photographic inclinations of his son or my corrupting his daughter-in-law. I will say that poor Dad on these trips would just be like, why are you taking 5 million photos of everything? Dad also said that I would not finish editing the trip photos before he died. Damn it, he was right. He cheated. My father was born into and would have been raised in the Jewish faith. He himself was not a religious man. I am not a religious man. So this is technically a secular, non-religious memorial. I believe Natasha Troop will probably do a prayer, since she has been kind enough to look up the rituals, and she, what is it, rabbinical, secular?
Secular Jewish community.
Secular Jewish community. So for those of you who are Jewish, Natasha will come up at some point and do a prayer. For any of you who are any other religion, if you would wish to pray or lead anybody in here in prayer and come up and talk and do that, you are more than welcome to, because that is offering your prayers and your well wishes, and the sentiment is appreciated even though I do not share your beliefs. So that I do not keep kangaroo. So that I do not just keep kind of babbling on, this will be the point at which I ask if there's anybody else who would like to say anything about my dad. And if so, raise your hand, because again, the microphone is to feed that camera for the recording for the people who are not able to make it. I see one hand. I'll just pass it. And cameras, again, will stay pointed this way, so if you don't mind being videoed, you can come up here. If you want to stay off camera and speak, you can just do it back there.
Hey, y'all. When Mike posted this memorial on Facebook, he said that he was pushing it forward so that I could attend. My name is Natasha, and strange but true, my parents also met at the University of Florida. I think my father graduated probably the year before old Mike started there. And I'm one of those people who, Mike's father and mother were generous enough to provide some wonderful measure of financial and habitual couches to sleep on, and one time rescuing me from getting their car impounded in Malibu. And I always remember that anytime that I came over to the Miller house, I was always welcome. And while Kathleen would chew my ear off with tale after tale of everything.
Dad was the quiet one.
Yeah, he would always chime in with just the right bit of sarcasm to make it all like just perfect. My 12-year-old daughter describes herself as being edgy and salty, which I say, oh, so you're a margarita. But I think that she's a kindred spirit to old Mike. She always has just that one comment that.
That's the birthday shirt. That one.
There you go. I like that one. As Mike mentioned, being of Jewish birth, and strangely for the last year I've been a Sunday school teacher for the Sholem community, which is a secular Jewish group that people are like, what do you teach on Sunday schools if it's not religion? And I'm like, well, it's culture, history, what it means to be Jewish. And I was up late the other night, and Mike was up late, and we were messaging back and forth, and he asked me to do something Jewish. to honor old Mike, and I was like, yeah, I think, but it's not gonna be like rabbinical. But I did, I started poking around, and traditionally at a Jewish funeral, you say the mourner's Kaddish. And I've been at many, many Jewish funerals where I've said the mourner's Kaddish and never really wondered what it meant. Just sort of said the words. which is kind of like what my bar mitzvah was like. But anyway, and so which is one of the reasons why I'm a secular Jewish teacher. But some of what was in the traditional Kaddish was very touching to me, but I wondered, what do people say who don't have the kind of faith that the Kaddish demands? Because in a traditional setting, Mike would probably have a torn piece of clothing, and then he would be saying the mourner's Kaddish every day for 11 months at the death of a parent, and having a hard time meaning it, I imagine. But I found something that I think that you could say every day and probably mean. The first line of the mourner's Kaddish is Yit Gedal V'Yit Kedash Shemei Rabbah, which, what did you say, Mike? Hebrew sounds like Klingon.
Something like that. What did I say? Klingon with a cold or something?
Yeah. I like to think that V'Yit Gedal V'Yit Kedash Shemei Rabbah is a little bit prettier than that.
It is.
And it
No
means,
model stops.
and it means, may his great name grow exalted and sanctified. And the mourner's Kaddish refers to Yahweh. But I found that there are communities of Jews who live on kibbutz in Israel, and they're very hardy, kind of salt of the earth people. And I'm sure if old Mike was in Israel, he probably would have stayed on a kibbutz, and I would appreciate this. This is the Kaddish of the kibbutzim by Shalom Samid in English, because it's more meaningful to us that way. Magnified be the name of the person, extolled be the labors of his life, and blessed through our memory for the sum of his deeds, through his days in the world, and for the actions which he did not manage to complete. For dreams that were spun and were then no more, and for precious virtues, and even human weaknesses that have faded away through the foggy mists of time. May the person's memory be radiant, and the reflections of his life be like the brilliance of the firmament in our hearts. Let his name endure as long as the sun shines. What remains of the person is the memory beyond the limits of time. His name shall not be covered by darkness. The imperative of his life's continuity will bring relief to our inmost pain. The march of time will be compassionate, and we shall cherish the fruits of his life for many a day, magnified and sanctified. And then the traditional Kaddish ends with Oseh Shalom Bimrav Huya Aseh Shalom Aleinu V'Yakol Yisrael V'Yimru Amen, which does call out to God, but I like the message. He who makes peace in his heights, may he make peace upon us and upon all Israel. Now say Amen. Thank you.
Looking at these pictures, it's kind of amusing because it took him until college for his eyebrows to grow in. Anybody else? Sure.
This table is Mike's Tai Chi class. And we're very happy to be here because Mike just brought so much joy and warmth and a great T-shirt every time he came. Thank you for all the memories you've given us now, because we didn't know him that much, but now I feel like we do.
Private man.
So we thank you very much for that.
Thank you for coming. Is Winston here? Good. Oh, you want to? Thanks.
Yeah, Diddles, Tai Chi was wonderful to have an experience, especially when you get to interact with people. And Mike was one of those that you could really interact with him. He's always scolding me, telling me, Winston, you're just not listening. Tai Chi, I'm like, yeah, okay. But man, he's a great hiker too, and I just admire him. And I hope we can all remember that our dads are real.
Thank you, Winston. Winston sent me a photo of the card you guys put together for him, and I was really... Dad trying to remember how long ago it was, probably about 15 years ago, had a detached retina. So they had to do the surgery, which is they take the lens out of your eye and they reinflate, they pressurize your eyeball so that the retina reattaches itself. And then Dad opted to not do the surgery to put a lens back in his eye. So his vision wasn't that good to begin with, and then you imagine literally not having a lens in the eye. He wouldn't have, I tried to show him the photo of the card that Winston sent me, and he wasn't able to see that. Margaret, the cards that came from your church, he knew about them, but he couldn't read yet, and couldn't get to his glasses. Anybody else? Thank you, Pat.
How do I start this? Well, I may be a little more lighthearted, but I know that your dad would have appreciated that. And
I tried to put in jokes.
I never needed financial help from Maxwell Miller, but I sure needed a lot of his patience. I do remember I did a lot of things. I broke his toilet. I broke his kayak.
I still have the audio tape of us breaking the toilet.
And to be taking a pee in it, too.
Yes, but I didn't think you were going to say that part.
And Mike and I always had a lot of names we called each other over the years. Wizard and Blah, 19 and K, M and H, and the one nickname that your father gave to me, and I don't know exactly what I did to warrant that, was Mr. Smelly Armpits.
I'd forgotten that.
Every time I put a deodorant, I always think of what your dad said, and so I always remembered that, and I always figured that was part of his just being lighthearted, his way of greeting me, and I always appreciated that back, and I just want to say I always appreciated the patience he gave to me, and the experience of having to meet his son, and what else was I going to say? As well, and I was trying to think of what else I would add to this, but I will just say that I'm just glad I got to meet you again, and I got to meet him again, and I know that you're going into the next chapter of your life where you are now the Mr. Miller, and I just want to convey my many blessings to you, to everyone you care about, and may the wind be swift at your back. May you have the perfect landing, and may the corn pops surround you. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Talking about my dad always being healthy, I think you were on the trip where Dad out-hiked me with his broken leg. I think you were on that one. That was one of the Trailblazer trips. Yeah, my dad out-hiked me with a broken leg. Oh, man. Anybody else? Pat, come up here, bring to you.
Hi, everybody. It's not enough. Mike was just joking. I have kind of a public speaking thing, so he thought it'd be really funny if I officiated his wedding in front of a similarly packed hall a few years ago, and I think that kind of got me over it. I just I didn't know Big Mike, Mr. Miller, who's always to me, as well as some people, but you know, I got to see him on some pretty important days, and he was a man of few words, but he did make those words count. It always felt like it was quality spending time with him, and like there was some substance to it. And anyway, he, like me, was unlike Mike, as not a person of any specific faith or codified religion, and that was the words of the secular Jewish interpretation, I think was really nice, and something that I've just been thinking of for the past week or so since he passed, was just sort of what is it for us to, who don't necessarily have like a written down, the idea of a heaven or anything, what happens after. And I kind of came up with something. I figured it out, looking at everybody here, is somebody said that Mozart didn't die, he became music. And I think that can kind of be extrapolated into what we see today. It's the things that he left behind in the life that he did live that continues to go on. The hiking, the silly T-shirts, and at the end, the sacred gift of life for those people that were imperiled for a moment by a runaway vehicle. All those things and all those ways are ways that parts of him continue to live. His son, his daughter-in-laws, all these things, all these qualities in Mike that that I continue and will all continue to experience for many years. All these stories that we have about him, all these jokes, they are Mr. Miller, and that's how he, I believe, continues. And I think that's sort of how we all continue. And eventually, everybody who ever knew our names, they'll all be gone too, and the pictures will fade and everything, but something, some little spark that nobody even knows where it comes from is always going to be out there. And I think that's just how this begins. So, I don't think it's necessarily the ending. I think it's just change. And I just wanted to share that, and thank you. And really like Mr. Miller.
Really. Come on here. Come on.
So I didn't know Mike's dad as much as some people did here. But years ago, we were in a band together, played all over the place, had some fun.
You're a musician who doesn't know how to talk into his mic.
Oh, yeah, great. But, Mike's dad was always there every time we needed a lift, an extra car, a hand. He was one of the kindest people I've ever met in my life. I know he didn't like his name sometimes, as Miller said, but funny story, when he met my parents for the first time, he didn't use his actual name, like kind of did. He said, "Hi, I'm Mike's dad." Because you can't call him Mike, because he would say, "What? Hey, Mike, what? No, the other Mike." We didn't call him Old Mike at that time. So just one thing stands out for me. I know he didn't like Maxwell, but I know something that he loved being called, and that was Mike's dad. So God bless him.
I'm going to expand on what you said, Steve. For a long time, people used to call me Mike Jr., and I would say that I'm not Mike Jr. because he's Maxwell Michael and I'm Michael Matthew. So I'm not Junior, so I was Mike the Younger. And then my mom expanded that joke. So Mike the Younger and Mike the Handsome. And then I think it was right after the time when Mom passed away. He changed that to Old Mike. So, right, you guys, Old Mike. But when we went to Antarctica, and when we went to Antarctica, his name tag actually said Old Mike. But I told the staff on the ship we were on, National Geographic Explorer, most amazing crew ever. I told them the whole story about how I used to be Mike the Younger and Mike the Handsome. So they started calling him Handsome Mike, and they started calling me Spider Mike. Because, I had the Spider-Man hoodie, and initially I was going to wear the Spider-Man hoodie, and at some point I would have rambled on about Stan Lee, which I did in a shorter version, and then unveiled the t-shirt, and I would have been all dramatic about it. But it was too hot to wear the hoodie. So. But my dad was not emotionally demonstrative. much at all. I don't, or maybe only one or two times I can think that he might have actually said, "I love you" to me or to Mom, that I can remember. He just didn't say that a lot. But Steve brought up with the Mike's dad, I guess his regard for me was shown more like little things, that if you were to call his voicemail message isn't "This is Mike Miller," it's "This is Mike's dad and this is his voicemail." You've seen my email address. It's, everybody wants to say it's Treem, and I see why, but it's TRI-M23, T-R-I, Greek prefix for 3, E-M is M, 23 is my lucky number, so TRI-M23, because I'm Michael Matthew Miller. And when my dad set up his email, he was Try-M Dad. So, I mean, just kind of that small thing. He wouldn't necessarily say, "You're my son, I'm proud of you, and I love you," but it was just little things he would do. And I don't think he would necessarily, ever say to any of my friends either, "Oh, I like you, I'm glad you're Mike's friend." He would just quietly do nice things. And of course, he did communicate in sarcasm and insult. So, Steve, Thomas, Brian, Dad's description of Leek was always that we were exactly halfway between Beethoven and pure noise. Yeah. I figured I'd take that because we were, halfway. We weren't on the side of the pure noise. Anybody else? No? That's good. That's fine. No, we've actually been going for. I have a timer on this thing, so we've been talking about Dad for well over an hour at this point. That's good. So. I guess I'll just once again thank everybody for coming out. We have a bunch of pizza, we have a bunch of ice cream. Should be on the back table, right? Ice cream. The ice cream's kind of sad. Dad always said that if he were, so when Mom got sick, and just before she passed away, we were able to ask, she always, there were some things that she wanted, and she always wanted a last meal to be a big juicy burger. She chose to skip on the last juicy burger. And she wanted a cup of tea, and we brought her her tea. And she wanted a rum and Coke, and Laura snuck in the rum. And she wanted a big gooey ice cream sundae, and so we got her her ice cream sundae. At Mom's memorial, there was also ice cream. By the way, when I die, there will be ice cream. Laura knows that. That's just set in stone. I also want ice cream at my memorial. But Dad always joked that if he were ever in a hospital and in a terminal situation, he wanted three things. He wanted a TV turned to Fox News so he could shut off his brain. He wanted a monkey button of morphine so he could shut off his pain. And he wanted ice cream so he could remember the good things in life. So, again, Dad's favorite meal would have been pizza and beer and ice cream. Well, if you want beer, she got beer. So, enjoy pizza, enjoy ice cream, enjoy beer. Hey, I'm going to be around for a while. If you just want to talk, I'll probably turn off some of these lights so that that's not so faded out so you can actually see what's going on. But once again, I just want to thank everybody for coming out to share in remembering my dad, because I really am going to miss the hell out of him. But it does make me smile to see everybody who's come out, like people I've never met before from the board and from his Tai Chi class, people I know who came from out of state. Drove all night, drove all morning to get here, right, Rachel? I really appreciate that. Family who, we're out of parents, man. We got to find another reason to get together. Somebody get married. Wait. I think we're running out of those options too, aren't we? Damn. So. Yeah, I guess I got nothing. Well, I mean, I got something. I could tell you a story behind almost every picture on here, at least anything after about 1980 or so. But yeah, just thank everybody for coming out. I really do appreciate that. And again, we'll hang out, we'll talk, drink, eat pizza. Ambrose was Dad's favorite pizza place, and Ambrose is one of the few places that can do a thick crust pizza that's not a grease sponge. It's really bready if you like thick crust pizza. So thank you all for coming out. If I have anybody on the home viewing audience, there was an attempt to stream this. I have no idea how well that went. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.